In 2002, a 12-year-old girl, Lucía Rivera, vanished from her home in the small town of Willow Creek, Georgia, leaving behind only unanswered questions and a shattered family. The local police quickly closed the case, labeling it as a runaway. But 15 years later, a stray dog digging in the abandoned schoolyard unearthed something chilling, and with it, a horrifying truth that someone tried to bury forever, seemingly never to be revealed. Willow Creek, a small town in southern Georgia, remained immersed in its familiar quietude during the fall of 2002. The deserted roads and old houses dotted the vast fields, untouched by time. The fall air brought gentle, cold winds, scattering yellowed dry leaves across the ground, creating a melancholic atmosphere, one that rarely changed. But on one late autumn day, that silence was shattered by the disappearance of a child. Lucía Rivera, a 12-year-old Latina girl, left home that evening to return to school and retrieve a box of paints she had forgotten earlier that day. It was the last time the Rivera family saw her, a simple box of paints, yet to Lucía, it was a whole world. She loved painting, loved colors, and in each of her paintings was a piece of her soul. But that box of paints disappeared, just like Lucía herself. After that day, no one ever saw her again. The police immediately launched an investigation. They began searching the small town for any trace of her, but as the days passed with no leads, they gradually gave up. In their eyes, it was just a case of running away. Despite the lack of evidence, they decided to close the case quickly. No one heard any noise when she disappeared, there were no traces, and no one had seen anything. Lucía was the daughter of an impoverished immigrant family. Her mother, Ana Rivera, was a single woman, living in deep sorrow. She didn't know what to do, unable to fathom what had happened to her daughter. The whole family lived in loneliness and helplessness. Ana no longer had the strength to bear the pain of losing her child, and shortly after Lucía's disappearance, she passed away quietly, without a word of farewell. Naomi Rivera, Lucía's older sister, left Willow Creek right after their mother's death. She couldn't bear the shadow of the immense loss, the shadow of her sister, who would never return. Naomi carried the heavy burden of guilt for not being there for her sister on that fateful day. She decided to leave the town, seeking a new life, hoping to forget the death of her mother and the disappearance of her sister. But even after leaving, the memories of Lucía haunted Naomi. She couldn't accept that Lucía had just run away. She knew that something was being hidden, some secret that the small town didn't want to reveal. Then, one day, after 15 years away, Naomi received news that she could never have anticipated. Naomi had grown up. She was now an investigative reporter in Chicago, working for a major newspaper, specializing in unsolved missing persons cases and unresolved events. It was a job she believed would help her forget the painful memories, the events that had haunted her since Lucía's disappearance. But all of that work couldn't ease the deep pain that had settled in her mind. Willow Creek High School had long forgotten the story of little Lucía. Life went on as usual. During a campus renovation, a stray dog wandered into the school unnoticed and dug up a necklace engraved with the name Lucía, unearthing a past that seemed to have peacefully slept. The barking of the stray dog caught the attention of a worker, who ran over and witnessed a shocking scene. Next to the necklace and the dog, there was a decayed piece of flesh with exposed bones. It was a skull. Stunned by the sight, he immediately called the police, his face drained of color. At the same time in Chicago, while Naomi was sitting and drinking coffee, she received an unexpected call from an unknown number. A woman's voice on the other end of the line said, "Hello, this is an investigator from Willow Creek. We have just discovered a body on the grounds of Willow Creek High School during the renovation process. We need you to come here immediately to help identify and provide information." Naomi's heart raced. The words were a shock, making it hard for her to grasp what was happening. She swallowed hard, a sense of dread overwhelming her. "A body? In the school? What's going on?" Naomi asked, her voice trembling. There was a moment of silence before the police chief continued. "We suspect this body is related to a missing female student from 15 years ago. The girl's name was Lucía Rivera, your sister. We need you to come here to confirm the information and help us verify." Hearing that name, Naomi felt the world spin around her. She tried to remain calm, but inside, thousands of questions flooded her mind. Lucía? After 15 years, could the truth finally be revealed? "Could it be Lucía?" Naomi asked, her voice shaking, unable to hide her worry. "It's possible. We found the body under an old layer of concrete in the school. We want you to come back here to confirm the DNA." The woman's voice was serious. Naomi couldn't believe her ears. 15 years had passed, but her sister had never truly disappeared. A part of Lucía's body still existed, buried under the old concrete, hidden from everyone. The whole town seemed to have tried to forget what had happened. But now, a secret that could no longer be buried had been discovered. The police theorized that after picking up her box of paints, Lucía, due to the dark, accidentally stepped into some freshly poured concrete, causing her to sink without anyone knowing. They leaned towards the possibility that it was an extremely rare accident. Lucía's funeral was held in the heavy silence of the entire Willow Creek town. Naomi stood by her sister's grave, her heart aching, but also filled with rage. She couldn't accept that Lucía's passing, Naomi's emotions were a chaotic mixture of grief and anger. She silently vowed to dig deeper into the circumstances surrounding it, even if it was an accident. "You can't leave like this, Lucía," Naomi whispered into the cold breeze, her eyes fixed on Lucía's tombstone. After the funeral, Naomi returned to the school, where she met with Principal Mark Herskin, who had always shown concern for Lucía. She expressed her desire to investigate her sister's accident and hoped the principal could assist her. Mark was pensive, and he said he understood Naomi's loss. He suggested that Naomi should track down Lucía's old friends. "Ask her friends. They might know something that we don't see," he said. Then he told Naomi to wait while he searched for contact information of former students. "It might not be entirely accurate, but here are all the phone numbers we have on file for the students," Mark said, as he handed Naomi a piece of paper. Naomi began reaching out to Lucía's old friends, hoping they would be the key to uncovering the long-buried secrets. However, one of Lucía's closest friends, Alice, was the only one who responded, while the rest of the numbers yielded no signals. Naomi didn't expect Alice's words to make her feel even more confused. Lucía might have seen our art teacher, Mr. Melvin, doing something strange with her friend. I think she knew something important. Thus, a new lead had emerged. Naomi decided to search for Mr. Melvin. But would what she found bring her closer to the truth, or would it only make everything more tangled? The big question still lingered in Naomi's mind. Who was truly behind Lucía's disappearance, and would she be able to find the truth before it was too late? Naomi sat in her old car, looking out the window where Willow Creek appeared like a faded painting. She had spent so much time searching, but Lucía's old friends had all left town. Each one had their own life, relationships, and memories that no one wanted to bring up anymore. But there was one person still here, someone Naomi thought she could reach out to: Alice. Alice, Lucía's best friend, was the only one left in this town, the only one who could provide Naomi with the missing pieces to the story she was trying to uncover. Naomi recalled the happy days when all three sisters were little, when Lucía and Alice were inseparable, always side by side. But now, Alice's silence made Naomi uneasy. She arrived at the small cafe on the edge of town, where Alice had agreed to meet her. The warmth of the cafe did little to ease the coldness Naomi felt inside. She looked around and saw Alice sitting alone in a corner, her eyes tired but unable to mask the pain. Alice, no longer the carefree girl she used to be, had been through so much alone. "You came?" Alice spoke, her voice hoarse as though she hadn't spoken to anyone in a long time. She stood up, her gaze full of sorrow and unfamiliarity. Naomi looked at Alice, feeling like an invisible wall stood between them. "Are you okay?" Naomi asked, her voice full of concern. Alice nodded, but then her hands slackened, as if she had no more strength to hide her exhaustion. "I tried to forget, Naomi. Tried to forget everything. But I know you need to know the truth, even if I've done wrong by holding on to it for all these years." Naomi stayed silent, her eyes fixed on Alice, waiting. She could no longer stand it. She needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. "You know, Lucía had a strange relationship with Mr. Melvin, our art teacher. I always felt something wasn't right between them," Alice said, her voice growing quiet. "It started when I saw Lucía always going to him, talking to him more than to anyone else. She'd always try to help him with extra lessons, even though she was just a student. At first, I didn't think much of it, but gradually, I started noticing something odd." Naomi felt a tightness rise in her chest. "Did she say anything to you?" Naomi asked, her voice trembling. Alice sighed, her gaze lost on some invisible point. She didn't say much, but Lucía seemed worried. She didn't speak it out, but I could see it in her eyes. There was something that scared her. Once she gave Mr. Melvin a painting, and I think it wasn't just a gift. It seemed like a message, a warning, something Lucía couldn't say out loud. Naomi was stunned, a strange feeling rising in her chest. "Where is that painting? Do you know where it is?" Naomi asked, her concern clear. Alice looked at Naomi with a pained expression. "I don't know. After Lucía went missing, everything became so unclear. Maybe Mr. Melvin knows, but he might have hidden it. No one's seen that painting since, Naomi." Alice's words left Naomi with an indescribable fear. Lucía had painted something to warn about a terrible event, but couldn't speak of it. Could all of this have started with Mr. Melvin? And was the relationship between him and her sister connected to Lucía's disappearance? "Do you think Mr. Melvin knows anything about this?" Naomi asked, trying to clarify further. Alice didn't answer immediately. She nodded slowly, her eyes full of worry. "I'm not sure, but maybe he's the last one who knew what Lucía saw, and maybe he understood what she was trying to say, but couldn't." Naomi stood up, feeling the final wall in her story begin to crumble. "Thank you for sharing this with me, Alice. I'll go see Mr. Melvin," Naomi said, feeling as if she was closer than ever to uncovering the truth. Alice looked at Naomi with concern. "Be careful, Naomi. Don't fall into the trap they've set." Naomi nodded, her heart heavy. She knew she was walking down a dangerous path, but she couldn't stop now. She had to find out the truth about what had happened to her sister, and no one, not even Mr. Melvin, could stop her. Naomi drove through the familiar roads leading to Mr. Melvin Jones's house, Lucía's art teacher. She had been given this address by Principal Mark, though he didn't specify why. Naomi felt something was off. She could sense that everything surrounding Lucía's disappearance wasn't as simple as it appeared. When she arrived, Mr. Melvin's house didn't look much different from her memories. An old house with an uncared-for garden. The walls were cracked, and the windows were clouded with age. Naomi took a deep breath, carefully stepping onto the old wooden porch. She knocked on the door and heard footsteps from inside. The door opened, and there stood Mr. Melvin, a middle-aged man with graying hair and tired eyes. "Naomi?" Mr. Melvin looked at her in surprise, but quickly replaced it with suspicion. "Are you here to see me?" Naomi nodded, unable to hide her tension. "We need to talk about Lucía." "All right, come in," he said, leading her into the living room. When Lucía was still alive and hadn't gone missing, she was very close to you, right? Do you know anything about the truth that neither I nor the police have ever discovered? Naomi asked, her voice steady, but her eyes searching. He was silent for a long moment, then finally sighed. I found that comb the next day, when I was walking through the schoolyard. With that, Melvin took a white ivory comb from the bookshelf, engraved with the name R. Lucía. Naomi immediately recognized it. It was the comb she had given Lucía for her birthday. Her voice trembled as she said, "This is Lucía's, Mr. Melvin." Melvin replied calmly, "At the time, I thought it was just an ordinary object, but when I saw the name engraved on it, I knew it was Lucía's. I thought it might be an important clue." Unable to stay calm, Naomi grew angry. "Then why did you hide it from the police? Do you realize how your actions have obstructed the investigation? Or is it because you had some conflict with her, and you're the one who harmed her?" Mr. Melvin was taken aback by Naomi's attitude, and snapped back. "Girl, calm down. I gave the comb to the police, but they refused to accept it. They said the case was closed and didn't need any more evidence. They even closed the file quickly without further investigation. I tried, but I couldn't change their decision." Naomi felt as if she had just been slapped. The pieces of Lucía's story were starting to become clearer, and the more she learned, the more she felt that the people responsible wanted to conceal the truth. Her suspicion grew stronger. "Then didn't you think you should have done something?" Naomi's voice broke, tight with emotion. Mr. Melvin sat quietly for a moment, looking at Naomi. "I'm just an art teacher, Naomi. I'm not a detective. I can't do anything more than provide what I know. But maybe you should go somewhere else, to people who can truly help you." Naomi didn't say anything more. She sensed that there were deeper reasons for everything here that she couldn't yet understand. But she couldn't stop. She had to continue searching for the truth, no matter where it would take her. After meeting Mr. Melvin, Naomi went to the town's police station, a place she never thought she would return to. But with everything she now knew, she had no other choice. She walked in and immediately felt the difference in the atmosphere. The yellowing walls, the old worn chairs, all of it seemed forgotten by time. She went to see Camden Sykes, the deputy sheriff, her ex-boyfriend, the one she had left behind when she left town. "Naomi, you're back?" Camden looked up from his desk, surprised, but quickly turned serious. "It's been a long time. I'm sure you have your reasons for being here." Naomi didn't hesitate. "You know what happened to Lucía, right? You know why the case was closed so quickly without proper investigation. Do you know about the comb Mr. Melvin found?" Camden was silent, his eyes fixed on Naomi's face, as if torn between right and wrong. "Are you sure you want to know everything, Naomi? This isn't as simple as you think." Naomi stared at him, feeling the tension in the air. "I went to see Mr. Melvin. He said that the police refused to take the comb and closed the case immediately. Did you know about this?" Camden sighed, not answering immediately, his gaze falling to the desk for a long moment. Melvin and Pruitt argued about Lucía's case. Pruitt didn't want anything to affect the town's reputation. He always wanted everything to run smoothly, without disruption. And Melvin, he might know more than we think. "Then why are you sitting here, Camden?" Naomi asked, her voice betraying her frustration. "What are you doing to change this?" Camden looked at Naomi, his expression no longer cold. "I'm a cop, Naomi, but I'm also the man who once loved you. Sometimes, between right and wrong, I have to make decisions that aren't easy. Pruitt is a man with a lot of power here. Not everyone wants to go against him." Naomi stood up, walking toward Camden, unable to bear his indecision any longer. "You say Pruitt knows everything, but still lets things continue like this? Do you think that's right?" Camden stayed silent for a long time, then finally spoke quietly. "Pruitt knows what to bury, so no one dares to dig it up, and that's why this case has never been reopened. Naomi felt a surge of anger rise in her. Pruitt, the head of law enforcement in this town, was the one who had covered up the truth. Everything she had learned, everything she had hoped for, was being concealed by those in power. She turned away, determined not to let this continue. "I will keep going, Camden. I will find the truth, no matter who I have to face." Camden stood up, watching Naomi, helpless. She had entered a battle that no one in this town wanted to fight. But Naomi couldn't turn back. She walked out of the police station, feeling that everything had changed. Those who had protected the truth were now the ones trying to hide it. But she wouldn't stop, wouldn't give up. She had to find Lucía. She had to know the truth. Naomi felt like she was lost in a maze full of fragmented pieces. She needed to connect these clues, to uncover the truth. But everything was too chaotic. She couldn't solve this on her own. After her meeting with Mr. Melvin, she decided to seek out Principal Mark, the one person she thought might help her clarify the complex details of this case. She arrived at Principal Mark's office on a gloomy morning, weighed down by a heavy heart. As she entered his office, Naomi immediately noticed a difference in how he was treating her compared to their previous encounters. He was no longer the confident and eager principal she once knew. Principal Mark looked at Naomi, his eyes filled with concern and, perhaps, a hint of unease. "Naomi, is there something you need?" Principal Mark asked, his voice lowering. He pushed his glasses up his nose and looked at her cautiously. "Principal, I feel like what I know isn't enough. Everything's too complicated, and I can't do it alone. I need help," Naomi said, her voice choked but full of determination. Principal Mark stood up, walked to the window, and looked outside. After a moment, he turned back to her, his eyes never leaving Naomi. "You need to be patient, Naomi. This isn't an easy case to solve. You have to trust the police, trust that they're doing their job." Naomi looked at him, a tinge of disappointment creeping into her heart. "But you see, the police closed the case too quickly, dismissing all the evidence. Don't you feel like something's not right?" He remained silent for a while, then sighed softly. "I understand how you feel, but you have to remember, sometimes we can't do everything ourselves. What you know, you can hand over to the police. They'll continue the investigation and find the truth. You need to trust in the system." Naomi felt a bitter taste in her mouth, but she knew there was nothing else she could do but follow what the principal had said. She had too many doubts about the police and what they were doing. But this time, she had no choice. She felt like she had reached the limit of her patience. "Well, I'll leave everything to the police," Naomi replied, though in her heart, she wasn't fully convinced. When Naomi left Principal Mark's office, she couldn't stop thinking about the words he had just said. Could she really trust the police with everything, without worrying about the secrets they had buried? That question kept haunting her. That evening, when Naomi was preparing to go to the police station to report, she unexpectedly saw Sheriff Pruitt walking out of the building. A sense of unease washed over her. She couldn't pass up this opportunity. Pruitt was the one she suspected the most, the one who might know more than he had let on. Naomi decided not to go directly into the police station, but to quietly follow him from a distance. She kept a safe distance, making sure not to be detected. He walked through the empty streets of the town, his steps steady, seemingly unaware that anyone was following him. Naomi started to feel like something was off when Pruitt turned onto a narrow path that led deep into the forest outside the town. She quietly trailed him, her heart racing. This town had little else besides sparse houses and empty streets. Pruitt led her to an abandoned plot of land where there was a cabin hidden deep in the woods. Naomi carefully surveyed her surroundings, then moved closer. As she neared the cabin, a cold chill took over her body. She sneaked onto the property, where there was no one else. Suddenly, beneath her feet, Naomi spotted something sticking out from a pile of fallen leaves. A small bracelet, engraved with the name Alice. This is Alice's? Naomi whispered to herself, her hand trembling as she picked up the bracelet. Everything in her mind suddenly spiraled. Why was this bracelet here? What did it have to do with Lucía and her disappearance? Just then, Naomi heard a noise from the cabin. She quickly hid in a nearby corner. Pruitt stepped out of the cabin, looking around to make sure no one was watching. Then he went back inside and resumed his conversation with a stranger. Naomi listened intently to every word, sensing the tension in the air. Every word exchanged between Pruitt and the man was heavy, vague, and full of implications. One of Pruitt's statements made Naomi shudder. "We need to make sure no one digs into this anymore. If they keep digging, no one will dare speak up." Naomi's eyes widened, and in her shock, she accidentally dropped the bracelet, making a faint noise. Pruitt jolted, and his footsteps grew louder as he moved in her direction. Naomi held her breath in fear. But at that moment, Camden appeared from behind and quickly diverted Pruitt's attention. He stopped Pruitt, saying something that made him turn away from Naomi. Naomi seized the opportunity to sneak out of the property and find a safe place. As she ran out, Camden caught up with her. He turned to look at Naomi, his expression resolute. "You can't do this alone. I'll help you find the truth." Naomi looked into Camden's eyes, sensing the sincerity in his words. She had no choice but to trust him. "Then, let's go together," Naomi responded, her heart full of resolve. Together, they ventured into the dark forest, preparing to face the secrets no one wanted to uncover. Naomi sat alone in the quiet room, her mind still spinning with the strange events and the clues she had just uncovered. Suddenly, a knock on the door startled her. She stood up and peered through the crack in the door, seeing Mr. Melvin standing outside, his face no longer cold as it had been during their previous meeting, but rather filled with clear worry in his eyes. "Naomi, I need to speak with you. There are some things I need to tell you," Mr. Melvin said, his voice deep and hesitant. Naomi hesitated, but eventually she opened the door and let him in. "What is it?" she asked, keeping her distance as he stepped inside. "It's me," Mr. Melvin began, his hands trembling as he held out a small painting. "I think you should know about this painting. Lucía painted it before she disappeared. At the time, I didn't understand much about it, but now I think you need to see it." Naomi looked at the painting he handed her. At first she saw only a simple landscape of the classroom, much like the paintings Lucía had done before. The image depicted the familiar scene of the school, with students sitting in the classroom, but the light in the painting seemed dim and lifeless. She looked closer at the corner of the painting, and suddenly, everything stopped. In the bottom right corner of the painting, in a carefully drawn section, there was a very unusual image. Alice was standing, looking at Mr. Mark, Lucía's best friend's eyes, full of worry and strange intensity, as if she were trying to warn someone. This small but clear image immediately caught Naomi's attention. She blinked, and it felt as if everything suddenly became clear. This means—" Naomi's voice trembled. "Lucía saw something between Alice and Mr. Mark, didn't she?" Mr. Melvin was silent, nodding his head. "I don't know for sure, but I think something wasn't right. Lucía painted this right after she felt something strange between Alice and Mr. Mark. I thought it might just be the imagination of a little girl, but after what I've learned, I couldn't not share this with you." Naomi felt a strong shock hit her. What she had just seen in the painting wasn't just a sign of Lucía's concern, but a warning that couldn't be ignored. Alice, Lucía's best friend, was looking at Mr. Mark with suspicion, as though she had discovered something truly frightening. A relationship between Alice and Mr. Mark that Naomi could never have imagined. Naomi's heart felt heavy. "So do you think Alice and Mr. Mark had an inappropriate relationship?" Mr. Melvin sat down in a chair, gripping the painting tightly. "I'm not sure, Naomi, but I think Lucía discovered something, and maybe she saw or suspected something that we cannot fully understand." Naomi didn't know what to do with this information. It felt as though she had just opened a door, but everything was still too vague, not enough to clarify the doubts that filled her mind. A few hours later, Naomi met Camden. He had arranged to meet her at a small cafe outside of town. When Naomi entered, Camden was already waiting, his expression serious. "What did you find?" Camden asked as soon as she sat down. Naomi looked into his eyes and said with tension in her voice, "Mr. Melvin showed me a painting Lucía did before she disappeared. The painting shows Alice looking at Mr. Mark with a strange expression, like she was suspicious of him. I think Lucía saw something between Alice and Mr. Mark. This might be related to her disappearance." Camden remained silent for a long time, as though he was carefully considering Naomi's words. Finally he spoke, his voice low. "Naomi, there's something you need to know. Sheriff Pruitt, he's Mr. Mark's brother-in-law. Not many people know this, but I think this could explain everything." Naomi stared at him, feeling both surprise and disbelief. "You mean Pruitt is Mr. Mark's brother-in-law? How come I never knew about this?" Camden nodded, his expression tense. "Yes, Pruitt has a very close relationship with Mr. Mark, and I suspect he's been hiding some things. What I'm telling you isn't just speculation. Pruitt has likely been covering for Mr. Mark for a long time. They're part of a network that I can't just break through alone." Naomi felt all the pieces she had been looking for suddenly fall into place, forming an alarming connection. "Then what about the bracelet? Alice's bracelet that I found in Pruitt's cabin? Does it have anything to do with all of this?" Camden didn't respond immediately. He looked at Naomi for a long time, as if making sure she was ready to face the truth. "I think everything you're suspicious about is valid. Pruitt, Mr. Mark, and Alice. They all have a close connection, and I think we're getting closer to uncovering the truth." Naomi felt her heart tighten. She was so close to breaking this secret, but she knew that she was stepping into a battle no one could have predicted. These three people, Pruitt, Mr. Mark, and Alice, what were they involved in regarding Lucía's disappearance? She couldn't stop. She had to keep going. "So, what do we do next?" Naomi asked, her gaze determined. Camden looked at Naomi, his face filled with resolve. "We'll find the truth together, Naomi, and I'll help you, step by step." Naomi nodded. Finally, she wasn't facing this alone anymore. Together with Camden, she would unravel all these secrets, and no matter what dangers lay ahead, she wouldn't stop until she discovered the truth about Lucía. Naomi and Camden had spent many days following new leads, but it seemed every path led to a dead end. Alice, Lucía's best friend, was the key figure they needed to approach. However, all attempts to contact her proved fruitless. Alice didn't answer calls, didn't reply to messages, and all of her social media accounts were temporarily frozen. This made Naomi feel even more anxious, as if someone was trying to prevent her from reaching the truth. After Camden spent some time investigating Alice, he uncovered a surprising fact. Alice was an orphan. However, one detail made Naomi even more confused. Although Alice didn't have a stable job, she was living in the most expensive apartment complex in Willow Creek. This raised a question. How could she afford to live in such a luxurious place? Camden continued investigating, but all attempts to reach Alice were in vain. Every trace of her became increasingly elusive. However, during the investigation, an unexpected event occurred. One morning, while Naomi was at the office, Sheriff Pruitt suddenly called Camden. This time, unlike other calls, Pruitt didn't just ask about the progress of the investigation. but also instructed Camden to report on Naomi's recent activities. He even told Camden to keep a close eye on her every move, as if he had realized something unusual. "Camden," Pruitt's voice boomed through the phone, heavy and authoritative. "I've heard about Naomi's actions. She's investigating this case blindly. I want you to make sure she doesn't go too far. Wrap this up, and I'll consider promoting you." In the call, Mr. Mark was also present. His words weren't just a fake concern, but carried a hint of threat. "We can't let such a trivial case disrupt everything. Camden, do what we say. Don't let this truth harm anyone." Camden listened to these words, his heart filled with conflict. He had to choose between being loyal to Pruitt and Mark, or standing by justice, finding the truth about Lucía. It was a decision he couldn't make easily. The memories of the love and loyalty he once had for Naomi now became painful torment in his mind. But in the end, he knew what he had to do. He couldn't let things continue as they were, no matter what promises Pruitt made. When everything seemed to be at an impasse, another event changed everything. Mr. Melvin's house was burned down, reduced to ashes. All of the paintings he had ever created and stored were destroyed, except for one, the painting Lucía had made. This was the only remaining evidence Naomi could rely on. Melvin was shocked and devastated when he saw his home destroyed. He came to see Naomi as soon as he heard the news, and in his emotional state, he couldn't hide his doubts. "Naomi, I know you're looking for the truth, but I'm not sure I can trust Camden anymore. He's one of Pruitt's men. I don't know if he's working for us or against us." Naomi felt her heart tighten, but she remained resolute. She had to trust Camden. She had to find the truth. The next day, Naomi and Camden continued searching for more clues. They went to the post office near the school, where they knew there was an old CCTV tape storing footage from the time Lucía disappeared. And what was astonishing was that, in the footage, Principal Mark was present at the school around the same time Lucía went missing. This completely contradicted what he had previously said. Mr. Mark couldn't explain his presence at the scene during that time, especially since he had repeatedly denied any connection to the case. At the same time, Camden dug into financial transactions and uncovered a series of large transfers that Principal Mark had made to Alice's account. This further clarified the relationship between the two, and Naomi became more certain that something suspicious was being concealed. "Have you looked into Alice's social media?" Camden asked Naomi as they sat in their office to discuss the new findings. Naomi shook her head. "No, but I just checked recently. Alice lives a luxurious life, but recently she posted a strange photo. It only showed the back of a man. She deleted it immediately, but I managed to screenshot it." Naomi looked at Camden's phone screen, where the image was enlarged. Melvin immediately recognized the figure. "That's Mr. Mark," he said, his face hardening. "She saw something, Naomi, and Mark knows she might reveal this secret." Naomi, Camden, and Melvin gathered the critical evidence they had collected. Alice's bracelet, Lucía's painting, the CCTV footage, and the financial transactions. All these clues connected, painting a clearer picture of the suspicious relationship between Alice, Mr. Mark, and Pruitt. Naomi couldn't ignore the fact that Lucía might have discovered these relationships, and that's why she was silenced. Naomi felt she was nearing the end of the road. Pruitt was the one hiding the truth at all costs, and Mr. Mark had always been part of the cover-up. But now she had no other choice but to continue the fight. She stood up, looked into Camden's eyes, and said with determination, "We won't stop until the whole truth is exposed." Naomi stood in front of the screen, gripping her phone tightly. She had spent hours preparing for this crucial moment, a nationwide live stream to expose all the truths about Lucía's disappearance. This was her final, decisive step, the only way to bring to light all the secrets that the town of Willow Creek had hidden for the past 15 years. Everything was in place. She had connected all the evidence: Lucia's painting, Alice's bracelet, the CCTV footage, and the shady financial transactions of Mr. Mark. But even though all these clues confirmed the truth, an insistent fear lingered in her heart. Would the public believe the revelations she was about to make? Or would they dismiss it all as vague speculation without strong enough proof? As Naomi prepared, Mr. Melvin came to see her one last time. He looked at her with a worried expression, his voice lower than usual, as if issuing a warning. "Naomi, I still have doubts about Camden. I can't fully trust him. He might have fabricated evidence to destroy them, protect Pruitt and Mr. Mark. I feel like something isn't right." Melvin's words weighed heavily on Naomi's heart. She had trusted Camden, but in these final moments the doubts she had couldn't be entirely erased. However, she decided that she couldn't back down. Camden had stood by her throughout this journey, and everything she had witnessed was the truth. She couldn't let fear control her now. "Melvin, I have to continue. It's the only thing I can do to honor Lucia," Naomi said, her eyes filled with determination. Melvin sat in silence, with no more words to say. He could only sigh, understanding the resolve in her gaze. "Good luck, Naomi. I will always be by your side." Naomi stepped out of Mr. Melvin's office, determined not to let anyone or anything stop her. She began the live stream, broadcasting nationwide, with the sole goal of bringing the truth to light. The missing case that has been covered up for 15 years. Naomi's opening words echoed through the live stream, slowly but powerfully. She sat in front of the camera, gripping the microphone tightly, and began to share every detail about Lucia, the clues uncovered, and the people responsible for the case. She did not hide the truth about Mr. Mark, Alice, and Pruitt. In the first few minutes, she received a lot of feedback from viewers, most of it curiosity, with some expressing doubts. However, as the information delved deeper into the evidence, the reactions from the audience began to change. Many negative comments appeared, mocking the evidence Naomi had presented, claiming it was all vague speculation. They doubted the authenticity of the evidence, suggesting that Naomi was trying to fabricate a story without strong enough proof. "This is what I found. I can't stay silent when I know people like Pruitt and Mr. Mark are hiding the truth," Naomi said with an emotional voice, struggling to keep her nerves in check. "We can't let Lucia and the other victims be forgotten." Naomi's heart tightened as she read the mocking comments. She wondered if she had made the right choice. But she couldn't stop now. She had started this, and now it was time to finish it. Suddenly, just as Naomi was starting to feel anxious, a familiar figure appeared in the frame. Camden stepped into the room, his eyes tired and dim. He walked with a limp, his face worn out, but when he saw Naomi, he gently smiled. Naomi stood up and hurried to him, emotional yet confused. "Camden, where have you been? Why did you—" "I'm okay," Camden replied, his voice hoarse, as though he had been through something terrible. He sat down, his gaze resolute. "Naomi, I need to tell you something. I can't leave you alone. I want to go on air with you to tell the truth." Naomi looked at him, still unsure of everything. Camden reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick stack of documents, the evidence he had collected over time. "I found documents from the financial transactions between Mr. Mark and Alice. The school's financial donations were used for money laundering and covering up shady expenditures. They kept me imprisoned and tortured, preventing me from finding the truth." He continued detailing everything. Naomi felt the tension and fear rising within her, but at the same time, clarity began to return. She could sense the sincerity in Camden's eyes. He had truly found solid evidence, and now he had returned to help her finish what they had started. "I can't let them continue deceiving everyone," Camden said. "We need to expose everything. We need to bring the truth to light." Naomi couldn't help but sigh in relief. She knew they were only one step away from clearing everything up. Together with Camden, they began preparing all the evidence and getting ready to go live again, to reveal what she had never imagined. But just as they were about to start again, Camden paused for a moment, his eyes filled with determination. "Naomi, I'm ready to stand with you, no matter what the worst may be." Naomi nodded, her gaze now full of resolve. "Thank you, Camden. Together, we will make the truth known." And this time, no one would be able to stop them. The Willow Creek community, once a quiet village, now erupted in anger and outrage. What Naomi and Camden had exposed was not only the truth about Lucia's death, but also the dark secrets that the powerful figures in the town had hidden for years. Irrefutable accusations and undeniable evidence ignited public outrage, prompting state police to launch a deeper investigation. But the most shocking discovery for Naomi and Camden was what they found in the dead of night. Alice, the girl they had been searching for, was finally found in the basement of Pruitt's cabin. On a tense evening, the state police, under the guidance of Camden and Naomi, traced a lead to an abandoned plot deep in the woods. It was the place where Pruitt had kept Alice hidden for so long. Officers raided the cabin, where Pruitt had tried to cover everything up. After carefully searching every nook and cranny, they discovered a small basement under the cabin's floor, the place where Alice had been held captive for months. When they found her, Alice was in shock and panic. It seemed she had lived in constant fear and torment for a long time. But when she saw Naomi, Alice could no longer keep quiet. She decided to tell the whole truth, no longer afraid. In the tense hours that followed, Alice told the heartbreaking story of her captivity. Alice began her account with a weak but clear voice. "I was taken in by Mr. Mark when I started high school. He was not only the principal, but he was also the man I secretly loved." Naomi felt as if she had been shaken awake by this truth. Alice, Lucia's best friend, was a victim of Mr. Mark, the very man she had always seen as an upright and respectable figure. Alice continued, her voice growing more anguished. "Lucia was the first to notice the difference in my behavior towards him. She was my best friend and tried to warn me, but I refused to listen. I couldn't accept that I was being manipulated like that." A heavy silence hung in the air, and then Alice continued. "One evening, when Lucia came back to the classroom to pick up something, she discovered me and Mr. Mark in a compromising situation. She saw everything, saw us, in the classroom. When Lucia found out, Mr. Mark chased after her. She was scared and ran away, but unfortunately, she fell into a cement pit in the schoolyard, where they were pouring new concrete. She couldn't escape." Alice held her breath for a moment, then continued, her voice choked with emotion. "At that time, I was going to pull Lucia up, but Mr. Mark told me to go back to class. He said he would save her, and told me to stay quiet and not tell anyone. But when I went back to class, I looked through the window and saw Mr. Mark trying to push Lucia down. I couldn't do anything. I was so terrified that I couldn't even look anymore. I just stood there, trembling and crying." Naomi couldn't believe what she was hearing. Every word Alice spoke felt like a slap in her face, shattering her with pain and fury. She couldn't fathom that Mr. Mark, the person she had revered and respected for years, could commit such monstrous acts. But everything Alice said made sense, and the evidence Naomi had gathered confirmed it. Alice continued with utter despair. "I regretted it, but I couldn't escape Mr. Mark's control. He gave me everything, the luxurious life, care, money, everything. But in return, I had to obey him. I couldn't get out, especially when I found out that I wasn't the only victim. He had many other girls. Everyone was a victim in his twisted game." Alice paused for a moment, as if trying to catch her breath to continue the story. I had planned to confess and tell everything, but Mr. Mark wouldn't let me. He manipulated my mind for so long, making me believe that if I didn't do what he wanted, everything would fall apart. Recently, when I discovered the truth about the other girls, I argued with him. But in the end, he locked me up in this very basement, and I couldn't escape. Naomi felt heartbroken and devastated as Alice told her story. She now understood why Alice had never spoken out. She had been manipulated and oppressed by the person she had always admired. The worst part was that Pruitt had helped Mr. Mark cover it all up, to protect his own powerful life and keep the truth from being exposed. At the same time, Pruitt and Mr. Mark were facing irrefutable evidence. The state police had entered the case, and every lead pointed to these two men. Naomi felt a strange sense of satisfaction, knowing that finally, everything was beginning to come to light. She turned to Camden, their eyes meeting. "We did the right thing, Camden. We found the truth. Everything will be exposed." Camden looked at her, a faint smile crossing his face. "Finally, Naomi. We have nothing to fear now." Naomi nodded. Mr. Mark and Pruitt would have to pay for what they had done. The truth had been exposed, and no one could hide it anymore. With Alice's help, her testimony, and the strong evidence, justice had finally been served. As the months passed, the events witnessed by the Willow Creek community remained indelibly etched in everyone's minds. Sheriff Pruitt and Principal Mark Herskin were arrested and put on trial. The irrefutable truth of their crimes was brought to light, shocking the entire community. After a tense trial, both were sentenced to life in prison without parole for charges of murder, cover-ups, corruption, and money laundering. However, the price Alice had to pay was not light. Despite being a victim manipulated by Mr. Mark, she was also convicted as an accomplice and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Alice admitted her wrongdoings and was willing to take responsibility, but she could not avoid the consequences of the law. However, many in the town knew that she had lived in the shadow of fear and manipulation for a long time. After the trial, Naomi stood amid a city she once knew well, now completely changed. The perpetrators had been punished, but the pain that Lucía and the other victims had endured remained raw. Naomi knew she could not return to her previous life. She could not simply forget everything that had happened. She wanted to continue doing something to help those who could not speak for themselves. Naomi, Camden, and Melvin decided to form an organization called We Remember Them, a group dedicated to supporting investigations and assisting families of missing persons who were ignored by the justice system, forgotten cases, or those hidden by powerful figures. They wanted to ensure that people like Lucía, the nameless victims of society, would never be forgotten. We Remember Them was their commitment, a promise to continue fighting for the truth, not just for the lost, but for those who still live. The organization quickly gained attention, and Naomi became a respected leader. She was not only fighting for Lucía, but for all those abandoned by society, the voiceless victims in missing persons cases. As things began to settle, Naomi visited her sister's grave. She stood in silence for a long while, looking at the inscription, which was not just a tribute to her sister, but a message to those who had overlooked and tried to bury the truth. The girl who remembered what others wanted forgotten. Lucía had remembered what others wanted to forget, and her truth would never be buried. Naomi knew that even though Lucía was no longer with her, the impact she had on society would never be forgotten. Lucía would always live on in the memories of others, and in Naomi's heart, her sister would always be the guiding light for the battles ahead. Battles not only to protect loved ones, but to protect those who cannot speak for themselves. As Naomi left Lucía's grave, she felt a new strength inside her. She was no longer just a girl mourning the loss of her sister, but a warrior of truth, someone who would not stop until every victim found their justice. In the evening sunlight, she turned back to look at the grave, her heart full of gratitude. Lucía had not died in vain. And Naomi would never forget the promise she made to her sister. "We will continue to fight. We will remember them." Naomi felt her chest tighten as she held the heavy envelope in her hands. The weight of the anonymous letter, with its cryptic ultrasound photo, was too much for her to bear. The words, "The blood flowing in your veins belongs to the killer," echoed in her mind like a haunting refrain. The image was one of an ultrasound, but what was even more chilling than the picture was the implication it carried. Who sent it? Why did it involve her mother, Ana Rivera? She couldn't sit still. In a panic, she hurriedly left her house and drove to the hospital, the place where both she and Lucía had been born. The memories of that place were fuzzy, but the urgency of the letter drove Naomi to act. She had to find out the truth. Upon arriving at the hospital, Naomi's unease and confusion returned in full force. She remembered the days when she and Lucía were young, and their mother was still alive, caring for both of them. The memories of Ana Rivera, the gentle and devoted mother, now felt distant. Naomi went straight to the nurse's station, where Nurse Margaret, who had cared for her from the beginning of her life, was working. Margaret had been there for Naomi and Lucía through many hard years. When Naomi entered, Margaret looked up, surprised to see her, but then offered a warm smile. "Naomi, it's been so long," Margaret said, her hands busy, but her eyes filled with concern. Naomi didn't have time for pleasantries. She got straight to the point, her eyes tense with worry. "Margaret, I need to know something. I just received an anonymous letter with an ultrasound picture of a baby and a message that says, 'The blood flowing in your veins belongs to the killer.' I don't understand." Margaret paused, her face suddenly serious. She looked at Naomi with an expression that seemed to have already anticipated this moment. "Naomi, there are things you were never meant to know, but perhaps now it's time for you to learn the truth." Margaret stood up, her hands trembling slightly as she opened a drawer and pulled out a notebook. She flipped through the pages, finally stopping at an old photo. Naomi looked at it and immediately recognized it. It was a picture of Ana Rivera, her mother, when she was pregnant. Margaret gently held up the photo, speaking slowly. "Lucía. She came here 15 years ago. She cried so much, asking about this. She wanted to know if she was Mark Herskin's child, not her father's." Naomi stood frozen, unable to comprehend what she had just heard. It felt as though her entire world was crumbling. "Mark Herskin? My sister. Is she his daughter?" Margaret nodded slowly, her voice breaking. Lucía was not his child, but her blood, it truly is his. Mr. Mark, he raped your mother. Ana never wanted anyone to know this because she was terrified. But Lucía knew. That's why she cried when she came to see me, because she couldn't accept the truth. Naomi felt as if her heart had been twisted into a knot. Lucía, the innocent little sister she had lost, was not only a victim of Mr. Mark, but also his daughter. Everything she thought she knew about her family, about her mother's innocence, was suddenly torn apart. The weight of it all was almost unbearable. And, "Did Lucía know the truth?" Naomi asked, her voice hoarse with emotion. Margaret lowered her head, her eyes red with tears. She knew. And that's why, on the night she disappeared, she tried to confront the truth. She saw something none of us wanted to see. And when she realized that Mr. Mark was her biological father, she was devastated. That's why she was killed. Naomi took a step back, unable to fully comprehend what Margaret had just said. Grief and sorrow washed over her, and she stared at the old photo of her mother, feeling the pain Ana must have endured in keeping this secret. Naomi whispered in the darkness of her mind. She is his blood, but she is not him. She is the reason we are alive. It was her final whisper to comfort herself, to soothe the pain she couldn't erase. She understood now that no matter what, Lucía was not a bad person. She had been a victim in a battle that she never chose. She looked back at Margaret, and in that moment, Naomi knew that she wouldn't stop. She would continue the fight, not just to avenge Lucía, but to ensure that dark secrets like this would never happen again. Naomi left the hospital in the dead of night, her heart burning with newfound determination. She was filled with both anger and hope. She would not let Lucía's suffering be in vain. Naomi's footsteps echoed as she walked through the cold, sterile halls of the prison, her heart heavy with the weight of what she was about to do. It had been a long time since she last faced Mark Herskin, the man who had caused so much pain to Lucía and torn her family apart. But today, she felt it was time. Time to confront him. Time to face the one who had stolen her sister's life and shattered everything she once held dear. Standing before the cell door, Naomi felt a surge of emotions. It had been years since she had felt fear when confronting those who caused harm. But Mark, he was the one who had orchestrated everything, the one who had turned her and Lucía's lives into a nightmare they could never wake from. She could never forgive him, but she needed to know what he truly thought. The cell door creaked open, and Naomi stepped inside. Mark sat silently on the bed in the corner, his gaze full of resentment and fury. His eyes were marked with fatigue, his face drawn with the lines of someone broken and desperate. He looked like a trapped animal, with no way out. Naomi remained silent for a moment, standing there, her gaze fixed on him. Her eyes were cold, but not angry. She wanted him to know that, despite the pain he had caused, she was no longer afraid of him. Finally, Mark spoke, his voice gruff and filled with bitterness. "What are you here for? To see me beg for forgiveness? Do you think I'll regret it? I don't need the forgiveness of someone like you." Naomi's expression remained unyielding, her eyes not leaving his face. She refused to be swayed by his venomous words. She walked over, sat down across from him, and pulled out a file from her bag. The anonymous letter she had received earlier. The reason she had come to face him today. "Mark Herskin," Naomi said, her voice calm but sharp like a blade. "I have something that I'm sure you didn't expect. Guess what? Do you know anything about this ultrasound image?" Mark didn't seem overly concerned at first, but Naomi saw his eyes flicker for a moment, betraying a subtle shift. She pulled the ultrasound photo from the file and placed it on the table. He stared at it intently, his self-satisfied smirk fading into confusion. "This is Lucía," Naomi continued, her voice steady, but carrying an unmistakable pain. "The girl you killed. And I'm her sister, Naomi Rivera." For the first time since Naomi entered the room, Mark froze. He stood up, his eyes wide with disbelief. He seemed to lose his balance, as if the ground beneath him had been ripped away. "What?" he whispered, his voice thick with shock. Naomi held his gaze, unblinking. "Yes, you heard me right. Lucía is your daughter, and I am your daughter too. What you did to my mother? You didn't just kill my sister. You destroyed the future of my entire family." Mark could not comprehend what he was hearing. He stumbled backward, clutching his head and screaming, as if trying to reject the horrible truth. "No, no, it can't be. It can't be me." He yelled in panic, frantic and wild. "That girl, how could I?" His shouts echoed in the room, but Naomi didn't flinch. She sat there quietly, ready to hear all of his excuses, but she no longer cared for his meaningless justifications. Lucía was dead, and he had made her suffer in fear and pain until her last breath. He sank, gripping the bed frame, struggling to stay on his feet, but failing. What did I do?" he muttered, his face twisted with madness. "Lucía, is my daughter? No, it can't be." Naomi stood up, not looking back. She couldn't stay there any longer. Her final words rang out like a conclusion that needed no further explanation. "You don't deserve an explanation from me. Lucía is dead, and you will pay for what you've done." Without another word, Naomi turned and walked out of the room, her heart heavy, yet somehow lighter. She was no longer bound by fear. The truth had been revealed, and now it was time to bring everything to an end. Later that day, Mark Herskin was found in his prison cell. Guards discovered him hanging, having taken his own life with a towel in the cold, empty room. He left behind a strange will, with no clear explanation of why he chose to end his life. In the will, a single line was scrawled in a hasty, unreadable hand. "My blood never belonged to me. It was all the price to be paid." No one could decipher the meaning of these words, but Naomi felt as though a door had been permanently closed. The wrongdoers had been punished, but the pain still lingered in her heart. As she sat in her room, looking at the picture of Lucía, a feeling of both relief and sorrow washed over her. Lucía couldn't survive the tragedy, but Naomi had kept her promise. She had found the truth and faced it, no matter how painful. In the darkness of her mind, she whispered one final farewell. "You are his blood, but you are not him. You are the reason we're still alive." She had done everything she could to see that justice was served. Naomi stood still for a moment, her eyes fixed on the words carved into the stone wall outside the office of "We Remember Them." The sunlight of the early morning bathed the words in a golden glow, making them seem even more meaningful. "We remember them, and we speak for them." She touched the inscription gently, a reminder to herself of the mission she had taken on, one that she, Camden, and Melvin had built together. This wasn't just a job, it was a promise. A promise that no one would be forgotten, that no one would have to suffer in silence. For every person left behind, there would always be a voice, and she would be the one to speak it. She sighed, leaning against the door for just a second longer, feeling the quiet peace that had begun to settle in her life after all the pain. But as she prepared to leave, a soft voice called out to her from behind. "Ms. Naomi, please help us." Naomi turned around and saw a young girl, no older than 10, holding her mother's hand. They looked weary, as if they had been on a long journey. The mother's eyes were heavy with sorrow, eyes filled with the fear and despair Naomi knew all too well, the fear of those searching for loved ones, but never finding them. The girl, though small, had a determination in her eyes that Naomi could sense, even though the girl might not fully understand what she was going through. Naomi walked up to them, her gaze softening as she saw the deep sorrow in the mother's eyes. She crouched down and gently asked, "What happened to your sister?" The mother bit her lip, tears welling up in her eyes. "My sister went missing 5 years ago. She was only a little older than my daughter here. Everyone says we can't find her, that it's been too long. But I can't give up. She keeps asking about her sister every day. She wants to know where her sister is, but I can't answer her." Naomi's heart ached as she looked at the little girl. In that moment, she saw herself in the girl's eyes. Lucía had asked her the same questions, questions that Naomi had never been able to answer. Lucía was gone, but the hope and desire for justice for the missing, like this little girl, had become Naomi's greatest driving force in life. Naomi gently pulled the little girl into her arms, feeling the child's smallness and vulnerability, but also the strength and hope that still radiated from her. She lifted her head and looked at the girl's mother with resolve in her voice, saying without a hint of doubt, "We will listen. From the beginning, not a word will be missed." The mother nodded, her eyes filled with hope. Thank you so much." Naomi smiled gently, placing a hand on the girl's shoulder. "Don't worry, we'll help." Back in the We Remember Them office, Naomi sat down with Camden and Melvin. They began reviewing the file of the missing girl and her mother, piecing together the small, faint clues they had. But to Naomi, every story mattered. She knew that behind each file was a family member desperately waiting to be reunited with their lost loved one. As Naomi flipped through the papers, staring at the photograph of the missing girl, she felt an eerie connection. She couldn't stop thinking about what had happened to Lucía, the short life her sister had lived, and the quiet departures of all the other victims they couldn't save. But she also realized that no matter what, justice had to be found for Lucía and for the others. Each missing person had their own story, a promise that hadn't yet been fulfilled. Naomi looked at the photograph of the young girl and silently vowed to herself that she would never stop searching for the truth, no matter who it was for. And in that moment, Naomi felt the strength of her belief in We Remember Them stronger than ever. Her organization wasn't just a job, it was a mission to bring justice to those forgotten, to prove that every life deserves to be heard. Naomi stood up, the morning light shining through the window, illuminating the words etched on the stone wall outside. She knew that she would never walk alone again. We will remember them, and we will speak for them. That slogan rang in her heart, powerful and full of pride. Naomi's story is not just a tale of revenge, but a story of rebirth of faith in justice, in oneself, and in the true values that must never be overlooked. Her journey serves as a reminder that truth and courage always have the power to overcome all obstacles. Just like Lucía, although her life was brief, the truth about her will live on in the hearts of those who loved her, and will continue to guide future battles. In life, there are times when we feel as if we are being pulled into a whirlwind of despair and darkness. But it is precisely in those difficult moments that we find strength within ourselves. If we dare to face the truth and not give up on the belief in the good, honesty and courage will lead us to peace of mind. And that is the final victory of goodness. Always remember, no matter the circumstances, we are never alone, and the efforts for justice, for truth, will never be forgotten.